Hi, I'm Owen Fitzpatrick, author of the book, The Charismatic Edge. And in this video, I want to share with you the 3 biggest mistakes we tend to make whenever we make decisions. The area of behavioral economics is a fascinating area which I've been studying for the last number of years, and it offers a lot of unique insights into how and why people make decisions. What I want to share with you in this particular video are the 3 biggest mistakes we tend to make whenever we're making decisions, whenever we're thinking about what we're supposed to do. This could be everything from buying a car, from hiring someone, for applying for a job, for interacting with our loved ones, for communicating with our children. There's a lot of situations where, based upon these biases, we make particular mistakes. And I want to share with you what these mistakes are, how they work, so that you can use them and ensure that the next time you're not as affected by them whenever it comes to making important decisions. So what are these particular biases? Well, before we get to that, let me just explain the basics about how these work. The truth of the matter is that the way in which we think is that we typically use a lot of shortcuts, or what we call heuristics, or patterns in terms of the way we think. In order for us to be able to navigate through the world, we learn how a door works. So you learn how to open a door, and once you've opened a number of doors, you understand the patterning in your brain allows you to understand how doors work. And so you're always understanding a particular type of knob on the door, you know how to use that, you know how to be able to operate it. The same is true about most things. And the reason is because our brain learns in patterns. Our brain patternizes because it's looking for different ways of making things easier. Your brain in many ways is an energy saving machine. It's designed to be able to save energy, and it saves energy by finding quick ways to do things. In order for it to find quick ways to do things, it lets us navigate our world 99% of the time through very, very quick ways of thinking. So it notices how things work, and immediately it gives us the general gist of things. And this general gist of things allows us to be able to make good decisions. So once again, it really is a wonderful apparatus and allows us to be able to get things right so much of the time. The problem is, because we take these shortcuts, because we take these quick efforts, because we're trying to save or conserve energy, our brains are at least, it means that sometimes we miss things. And there's certain patterns or certain habits that we get into, neurologically speaking, that mean that what happens is that when we are making decisions, we make mistakes. And so these particular biases, there's lots of different biases, and as you continue to look into the channel, you see me talking about a lot of different biases that we have. But for now, I just wanted to talk about 3. 3 particular mistakes we make. 3 what we call cognitive biases, in other words, mistakes that we make logically as a result of this shortcut system of our brain. Sometimes our brains think in a very analytical way, and in a very exhaustive way, and in a very detailed way. But for the most part, when we think very quickly, as we do most of the time, we do make these mistakes. So what are these 3 biases? What are these 3 mistakes we need to look out for? The first is what we call the confirmation bias. The confirmation bias is a very simple bias, which means that we tend to look for evidence that proves what we already believe is true, and we dismiss evidence that contradicts what we believe. In other words, if you have a certain belief or an idea in your head, your brain will spend time looking for evidence that proves it's true because you want to be right. You've got a need to be right, a desire to be right. We all crave certainty. Back in the hunter-gatherers days, we needed to be certain. We needed to know the right way to go. So your brain craves that certainty and craves and needs that particular being right. Because of that, it will look for evidence that proves that the idea it originally has is true, and it will dismiss any evidence that contradicts us. So what that means is when we have a negative thought or a negative belief, or a belief that's inaccurate, we're going to be spending our time dismissing evidence which might contradict that or argue against it. Now, this is truly important. Warren Buffett himself says that a lot of people make decisions that are problematic in terms of investments because they get a feeling or a good feeling about a particular investment, and then they go and look for evidence that proves that they're right, rather than actually looking at all the evidence there. They dismiss the evidence that actually contradicts it being a good decision. The first thing to do in order to be able to handle these biases, in particular the confirmation bias, is for you to be able to understand what assumptions you might be making in making any decision. So before you make a decision, there's certain assumptions people have, and those assumptions about the way things work, the way the industry works, if it's a particular decision in that case. Like, for example, if you're making an investment, the particular assumptions you have about the company that you're investing in, the assumptions you have about the market, the assumptions you have about the economy, all of those are assumptions or beliefs that you have. And if you make a decision based on those beliefs, then potentially you might be in trouble. But if you understand those assumptions and you understand the evidence that has led you reach those conclusions, and you separate each of the different parts of that out, so you're making an evaluated decision on the economy, on the particular company, on the particular market, it puts you in a much better position, because now you're being much more critical and you're being much more analytical in the way you're doing things, rather than just assuming. So, I heard from a little child before, to assume makes an ass out of you and me. And I think that's a really, really good piece of advice, a really, really good idea, because again, sometimes we do tend to assume. So again, with the confirmation bias, check your assumptions. Check what you've assumed and verify and make sure that you're not allowing that to dictate or to direct your, where your attention goes and what is it that you're thinking. So again, that's a really good way of handling the confirmation bias. The second bias is what we call the availability bias. Now this is a really important one as well. What happens is that in the modern world we work in and we live in, we are bombarded continuously with lots of information. In order to be able to get through to us, media companies and the like will present, or even businesses will present very powerful, strong, vivid imagery. They'll draw our attention to the most scariest things. So for example, let's take a very simple case of Ebola, or ISIS, the terrorist organization in terms of the Middle East. What they will do is they will tell us big dramatic stories, and they'll show us video footage, and they'll get us thinking a lot about ISIS, and they'll make us really, really scared of that. And we will feel that fear, and therefore we'll start to think about it a lot more, and it will be much more available to our minds because we find it easier to remember. The same is true with Ebola. So the Ebola in Africa, terrible, horrible disease, so sad that so many people died. And what they'll do is they'll talk about Ebola, and they will show us lots of images, and they'll remind us, and they'll scare us, and they'll tell us that it's on the fringes of Europe and we're about to, and it could spread any minute, and they'll do that, and that makes us very aware of Ebola, which again would be useful in order to stop us going to places that Ebola is, but again it's something that makes it very available, very easy. Now the truth of the matter is that by bringing something more available to us and by making us more aware of it, it makes us believe that that's more likely to happen. So for example, a lot of people are scared, very, very scared to fly, even though the chances of dying in a plane crash are actually, I think, last time I checked, lower than the chances of being kicked to death by a donkey. Now, again, it's not every day that you sit down and you're thinking, or there's movies made about this guy who was kicked to death by a donkey, or, some news broadcasts go, today, 600 people were kicked to death by, that doesn't happen. And if you've heard of anything like that, wow, that must have been terrible. But anyway, the point is that, again, the truth of the matter is that most people don't tend to think about the donkey stuff, but they do tend to think about the plane crash stuff. So therefore they're scared of a plane crash. The reason is because of the availability bias. The availability bias makes us think about things that are less likely to happen. Even though they're less likely to happen because they're more dramatic, our brains think they're more likely to happen because we can access them quicker, so we can think about them quicker, therefore we're more scared of them. I hope that makes sense. Now, how does this work in terms of making decisions? Well, a lot of times this can be how lotteries sell tickets, because by making it so that they paint wonderful pictures of how great it would be if you won the lottery, that becomes something that's in there in your mind. It's available all the time. You can easily imagine winning the lottery. People make jokes about it all the time. Oh, if I won the lottery. And so therefore, it's something that's very easily available in our mind. And because of that, we also think we have a better chance of winning it than we actually do. I mean, the chances of winning the lottery, I think, is something ridiculous, like if you were to pick a second from the 17th century till now, and you were to pick a particular second on a particular day, on a particular minute, and a particular hour, the chances of you winning the lottery is almost equivalent, I think, to getting that particular second if two people were to pick the same second. So it's ridiculously hopeless situation. Very, very difficult to win the lottery. But yet people do it, and they cross their fingers, and they tune into the lottery, and they're always thinking, oh, maybe this time, maybe it might just be me. And again, it more than likely definitely won't be you. If it is you, you can always invest in OFI, but it probably won't be you. It's because, again, it feels like it'll be you because it's available, because it's right there and it's vivid and strong, and it's, it's exciting, and therefore much easier to remember and much more likely to actually make a decision. So how do you guard against that? Well, it's really simple. What's really important for you to do is to be able to start to imagine and think about the other things that are, to be able to create an other scenario for it. So I gave you the quick, simple example that the likelihood or the percentage is, and you look at the facts and the figures of how likely it is to happen, and then you find something else that's comparative. So what I did was I took an example of, the 17th century until the modern day, until today, and picking a second accurately from there to there, and that seems impossible. And that's roughly the same odds as getting all the right lotto ticket numbers. So again, by giving you that comparison, now you're less likely to believe that actually winning the lottery is possible. If I've just destroyed your hope, I'm really sorry, but I have saved you a lot of money in lottery cards, so you win some, you lose some. Anyway, again, by taking something that's similar, by figuring out the statistics and finding a different example of the statistics, it makes it much more easy for you to make a much more accurate decision as a result, and thereby handle that availability bias. And the last particular bias that affects us, that influences us, is called the halo effect. The halo effect simply suggests that if we like one attribute of a particular person, let's say a particular person is into football, and we like football, or we see they support Celtic, which means they're highly intelligent, or it just means that they support Celtic, we're more likely to see a person who has a quality that we like, or has a similar liking than we have, or similar affection for something that as we have. We're more likely to see them as smarter. We're more likely to see them as better looking, more likely to see them as more competent, more likely to see them as nicer people with nicer personalities, more fun. We're likely to attribute a lot of other positive qualities, even though those positive qualities are in no way correlated or caused by the particular attribute we like. So the idea here is that if you want to be liked more, if you want to use this pattern, then by connecting with a person in a certain way, they're more likely to see you favorably in lots of other ways. Now, how do you guard against this? Well, it's very simple. What you do is you notice the particular bias, you notice that your likelihood is that you like a particular person, and you identify what is it about them that you like. And then you evaluate all of the other qualities, asking yourself the question, if they didn't have this quality, what would I think of every other quality? So again, you analyze their competence, their intelligence, their looks, or whatever context you're in, you analyze them, but without that particular quality in your mind. And by doing that, you're much more likely to make a much accurate decision about whether or not you want to communicate with them, work with them, date them, whatever the case may be. But again, it's very important for you to be aware of how that influences you and how that influences your decisions, so you can actually take that aside and focus exclusively on the most important things. So, 3 biases, 3 things that make us make decisions. And again, the 3 mistakes that we can make are the confirmation bias, where we look for evidence to prove what we believe to be true. We dismiss evidence that contradicts it. The availability bias, which is that whatever we hear about or read about or see or experience that is very dramatic and powerful, we're more likely to believe that that's going to happen. We're more likely to believe it's true. And then lastly, the halo effect, which is that when we like one thing of a person, one particular attribute of a person, we're more likely to think that they're great in all attributes. So again, being able to separate that is a useful strategy. If you're able to handle these 3 mistakes and you're able to make sure that you make at least less of them, I'm sure that you'll get much better results as a result. I really hope this video provided for you was valuable. I hope that it helps you to make less mistakes and make smarter and better decisions. And I hope that you're able to go into the future and make a real impact on the world. Let the world impact you. And, of course, as ever, be a legend in your own lunchbox. I'm Owen Fitzpatrick. Thanks for watching.